For 10,000 years, the galaxy burned. Empires fell screaming into vacuum. Civilizations older than stars were reduced to drifting ash. Every species learned the same lesson the hard way: resistance was extinction. And through it all, one world was ignored. Earth. Humans were catalogued as harmless, too emotional, too chaotic, too busy drawing pictures, telling stories, and arguing with themselves. The galaxy called it Crayon Sleep, a species forever playing, never preparing. No great fleets. No ancient warnings. No fear. So when the terror fleets finally turned toward Earth, it wasn't conquest, it was cleanup. Their message was transmitted across every human screen at once. Remain calm, little ones. This will be painless. Earth did not scream. Earth did not beg. Instead, a single reply went out, calm, measured, and impossibly old. Your assessment is correct. We were sleeping. A pause. But you misunderstood why. Across hidden bunkers, forgotten vaults, and silent orbits, locks disengaged for the first time since humanity learned fear of itself. Systems labeled forbidden came online. Fleets that never officially existed woke from darkness. The invaders laughed, right up until their sensors began to fail. Because the galaxy was about to learn a truth it had never considered. Humans did not grow weak in sleep. They grew disciplined. And now, the crayons were gone. The galaxy no longer remembered what peace felt like. For most species, history had become a list of endings: worlds glassed from orbit, trade routes turned into graveyards, constellations renamed after extinct civilizations. The terror did not come as a storm or a single empire. It came as a certainty. An ancient coalition of warlords, machine legions, and species that had long since replaced mercy with efficiency moved across the stars with one simple rule: submit or vanish. They called themselves many things across different regions: conquerors, purifiers, the final accord, but the result was always the same. Fleets arrived without warning. Demands were broadcast without negotiation. Resistance was measured in minutes. Entire planetary defense grids collapsed before their commanders understood they were under attack. The Galactic Council still existed in name, but its chambers had become halls of mourning. Delegates spoke in whispers, not out of respect, but habit. Loud voices had once drawn attention. Emergency sessions were held in darkness, with no records kept, because records had a way of being found. Species adapted in the only ways they could. Some surrendered preemptively. Others scattered into nomadic flotillas, abandoning homeworlds to save fragments of their people. A few attempted alliances, pooling technologies and fleets in desperate last stands. Those alliances burned the brightest and died the fastest. Every defeat reinforced the same belief: the terror could not be stopped. And yet, amid the charts of fallen systems and the simulations of inevitable loss, one anomaly persisted. A small yellow star. A biologically loud species. A planet called Earth. Humanity sat on the edge of map space like a forgotten footnote. Their transmissions were constant but trivial: music, arguments, entertainment, endless noise. Their technology, while inventive, appeared unfocused. No unified doctrine. No visible expansionist agenda. No war fleets worth cataloging. Long ago, a junior council analyst had labeled them non-threat sapients. The designation stuck. Humans were not conquered because they were not worth conquering. Their worlds produced culture, not weapons. Their broadcasts showed laughter, art, and absurdity even during internal conflicts. To a galaxy that equated survival with severity, humans looked like children playing while the house burned. So the terror passed them by. Decade after decade, while stronger species fell, Earth remained untouched. Some saw it as luck. Others as proof that humanity would never matter. Eventually, the anomaly became a joke among commanders: the Crayon species, always drawing, never building anything that lasted. But jokes fade when resources thin. As the Terror Coalition expanded, easy targets disappeared. Resistant worlds had already been crushed. Hidden enclaves grew harder to find. Supply lines stretched. And attention, inevitably, turned toward inefficiencies. Why leave a populated system untouched? Scans of Sol showed billions of humans, a developed infrastructure, and no meaningful interstellar defense presence. No visible dreadnoughts. No ancient energy signatures. No warnings carved into spacetime like those surrounding forbidden regions. Just noise. And life. The decision was not driven by fear or urgency. It was administrative. Earth would be conquered to clean the map. In the War Council chambers of the Terror fleets, projections showed victory in under one standard cycle. Casualties were estimated as negligible. Psychological impact was expected to be minimal. Another primitive world folded into compliance. No one raised an objection. No one remembered to ask why a species surrounded by extinction had never armed itself like the others. And no one considered the possibility that humanity's survival was not an oversight, but a choice. The invasion orders were signed, fleets aligned for jump, and the galaxy prepared to witness yet another inevitable ending. It had no idea it was about to witness a beginning instead. If you're enjoying this story so far, support the channel by liking the video, subscribing, and sharing it with fellow HFY fans, because humanity is only just waking up. In the archives of the Galactic Council, humanity occupied a narrow shelf, thin files, outdated scans, and a classification that no one had bothered to revise in centuries. Status: minor sapient civilization. Threat level: negligible. Recommendation: observe. Do not engage. The report that defined humanity had been written shortly after their first accidental broadcasts leaked beyond their system. It contained recordings of laughter layered over conflict, art emerging from chaos, and a species that argued violently one moment and collaborated effortlessly the next. To most galactic analysts, the conclusion was obvious: humans lacked discipline. They built weapons, but never perfected them. They explored space, but only in fits and starts. Their politics fractured constantly. Their wars ended not with extinction, but exhaustion. To a galaxy forged by survival, humans appeared unstable, too emotional to endure real interstellar conflict. So they were excluded. Humanity was never invited into the circles where real power was shared. They received no warnings about forbidden technologies. No invitations to mutual defense compacts. No mentors to guide them toward controlled expansion. The galaxy decided, quietly and unanimously, that humans would either destroy themselves or remain irrelevant. And humans did nothing to correct that assumption. They continued to broadcast their chaos openly. Fictional wars more dramatic than real ones. Animated symbols. Simplistic depictions of violence turned into entertainment. Even their military exercises were visible, clumsy, loud, and deliberately unremarkable. What the galaxy did not understand was that humans were not hiding their weaknesses. They were hiding their restraint. Long before the Terror Coalition rose, humanity had faced a truth most species never reached: intelligence without limits devours itself. They had come close, too close, to ending their own story. Weapons capable of sterilizing worlds. Autonomous systems that learned faster than ethics could follow. Conflicts where victory meant annihilation. Humanity survived not because they won those conflicts, but because they stopped. They imposed rules on themselves. Locked away technologies that had no defense, only escalation. Buried fleets that could never be justified as deterrents. Hard-coded restrictions into their own progress, not because they could not advance, but because they feared what unchecked advancement would make them. They called this era many things across their history. But in the deepest archives, beneath layers of civilian distraction and cultural noise, it had one quiet designation. Crayon Sleep. A deliberate regression in appearance. A cultivated image of harmlessness. A decision to let the galaxy believe humans were children playing with tools they barely understood. It worked. While other species chased supremacy and painted targets on themselves, humanity learned patience. While the galaxy burned, humans watched, studied, and waited. Not for conquest, but for necessity. Because they knew something the others did not. If humanity ever removed its restraints, there would be no gradual escalation. No warning period. No balancing act. There would only be clarity. And so, when the terror fleets finally charted a course toward Earth, they believed they were approaching a species that had never been tested. They did not realize they were approaching one that had tested itself and chosen sleep over destruction. The galaxy mistook silence for ignorance. And soon, it would learn the cost of that mistake. The War Council did not debate Earth. That alone should have been a warning. Within the command nexus of the Terror Coalition, conquest decisions were usually drawn-out affairs, layers of simulation, counter-simulation, and probability collapse. Even weak systems were analyzed for anomalies. Hidden weapons had ended campaigns before. Forgotten species had surprised invaders with suicidal brilliance. Earth received none of that caution. Its star glowed unremarkably on the tactical holomap. Its planetary bodies showed dense population, heavy electromagnetic noise, and an absence of hardened orbital fortifications. No ring defenses. No stellar weapons. No forbidden signatures etched into spacetime. Just life. Fleet commanders reviewed the data with open contempt. Human vessels rarely left their system. Their weapons relied on kinetic projectiles, chemical propulsion, and crude energy manipulation. Effective by primitive standards, irrelevant against fleets that had shattered neutron star bastions. One commander summarized the assessment with a dismissive gesture. A nursery world. Laughter rippled through the chamber. The Terror Coalition had faced warrior species bred for conflict, hive intelligences that calculated war like mathematics, and machine civilizations that rewrote physics mid-battle. Compared to those, humanity's record was almost endearing. Their wars were short, their alliances fragile, their victories incomplete. They had never finished an enemy. The decision matrix resolved in seconds. Objective, subjugation. Secondary objective, resource acquisition. Tertiary objective, psychological demonstration. Earth would serve as a reminder. A visible conquest, broadcast across the remaining free systems, to extinguish lingering hope. If even the untouched world fell without resistance, the galaxy would finally accept that survival lay only in submission. Invasion fleets were reassigned from holding actions. Dread carriers pivoted. Entire armadas aligned toward Sol with mechanical precision. For most campaigns, this level of force would have been excessive. For Earth, it was routine. Before the jump, protocol demanded a standard compliance transmission. The message was translated into every known human language, simplified for comprehension, and stripped of unnecessary threats. Remain calm. You are being integrated into a greater order. Resistance will result in termination. The message was sent not as diplomacy, but documentation, proof that procedure had been followed. Sensors recorded Earth's response in real time. No planetary shields flared. No fleet scrambled. No countermessage returned. Human communication spiked briefly, confusion, speculation, fear, but nothing organized. To the watching commanders, it confirmed everything they believed. A species overwhelmed before the first shot was fired. Jump coordinates were locked. As the invasion fleet entered faster-than-light transit, predictions filled the command displays, casualty estimates measured in decimals, occupation timelines counted in hours, cultural pacification models running automatically. No simulation showed meaningful resistance. Not one model accounted for intentional absence. Because no one in the chamber considered a possibility so absurd it never appeared in their datasets. That Earth was not unarmed. That it was not unprepared. That the silence they observed was not panic, but consent withdrawn. As the fleets tore through folded space toward Sol, the Terror Coalition believed they were approaching a conquest so trivial it barely deserved memory. They had no idea they were crossing a boundary humanity had marked long ago. A line drawn not in space, but in restraint. The invasion fleet exited faster than light space at the edge of the Sol system in perfect formation. Dread carriers unfolded like metallic continents. Escort vessels fanned outward, weapon arrays already warming, targeting solutions updating in cascading streams of data. For a moment, nothing happened, no alarms, no resistance, no sign that Earth had even noticed their arrival. Then the human signal came through. It did not arrive as a barrage or a challenge. There was no encryption beyond basic protocol, no attempt to hide its origin. The transmission originated from Earth's surface, rebroadcast through civilian satellites, layered calmly over every open frequency. A human appeared on the command displays. Unarmored. Unadorned. No insignia of rank. The individual's posture was relaxed, their expression controlled, not defiant, not afraid. Unidentified fleet, the human said evenly. Your presence in this system is acknowledged. Several commanders exchanged amused glances. A few muted their audio feeds, already bored. The human continued. You have entered a restricted zone under human jurisdiction. Before further action is taken, we request a pause of 12 standard minutes. The chamber filled with quiet laughter. A pause? 12 minutes? The request was flagged as a stalling tactic, the sort primitive species attempted when faced with extinction. Fleet doctrine recommended immediate escalation. But the Terror Coalition prided itself on procedure. Granting the pause cost nothing, and watching fear unfold could be instructive. Permission was granted. The human inclined their head slightly. Thank you. Please remain on your current vectors. The transmission ended. Across Earth, nothing visible changed. Cities did not darken. No mass evacuations were detected. Power grids remained stable. Civilian communications continued, music streamed, debates raged, ordinary life persisted beneath the shadow of annihilation. To the invaders, it was baffling. Sensors, however, began to notice something else. Deep space arrays picked up faint energy fluctuations, old, quiet signals awakening from dormancy. Orbits previously considered empty registered transient mass shadows. Objects that had not existed moments before were suddenly there. Internal fleet diagnostics flickered. Minor errors at first. Targeting lag. Timing discrepancies too small to matter until they accumulated. A junior systems officer reported that long-range scans of Earth were no longer resolving correctly. The planet's signature was blurring. Not cloaked. Not shielded. Redefined. Before a command decision could be issued, the human transmission resumed. Same individual. Same calm. The pause has concluded, the human said. We have completed internal review. A breath. Not hesitation, finality. You are advised to disengage and leave this system immediately. The chamber erupted in open laughter now. Advisories from a species that hadn't fired a shot. Empty words from a world already mapped for conquest. The human's expression did not change. We are aware that you believe us incapable of enforcing this request, they continued. This assessment was accurate, until now. Behind the human, the background shifted. Displays lit with symbols the galaxy had never catalogued. Designations marked restricted, sealed, do not activate. The human met the camera's gaze. Crayon Sleep has ended. Across the invasion fleet, alarms screamed for the first time, not from enemy fire, but from their own systems awakening to something they could not classify. And for the first time in centuries, the Terror Coalition hesitated. What the invasion fleet experienced next did not register as an attack. There were no weapons discharges. No visible beams, no expanding shockwaves, no signatures that matched any known form of warfare. Instead, the fleet's sensors began to contradict reality, space behaving incorrectly, causality stuttering at the edges of every calculation. Across the Sol system, things that had never officially existed began to reveal themselves. Deep beneath Earth's crust, vaults older than modern nations disengaged their seals. Not blast doors, but conceptual barriers, permissions written into physics itself. In forgotten lunar orbits, masses unfolded from dimensions too compressed to detect moments earlier. Around the gas giants, dormant constructs shed the pretense of natural phenomena. Humanity was not mobilizing. It was unlocking. The galaxy had assumed human technology plateaued out of incompetence. In truth, humanity had reached a threshold and chosen to step back. Every system now activating had been designed centuries earlier, tested in simulations no other species would dare to run, then buried under layers of civilian infrastructure and deliberate inefficiency. Crayon Sleep had not been an absence of power. It had been a leash. Within the Terror fleet, command coherence began to fracture. Weapon systems failed readiness checks because their targeting logic could no longer define what counted as a valid target. Defensive fields attempted to compensate for variables that did not exist moments ago. Physics itself seemed to hesitate around human constructs, as if waiting for permission to behave. A dread carrier attempted to bring its primary cannon online. The weapon cycled. Charged. Fired. Nothing happened. Not because the shot missed, but because the firing solution retroactively invalidated itself. The projectile's path conflicted with a localized rewrite of probability space anchored somewhere near Earth's orbit. Human doctrine files, intercepted too late, would later label this effect pre-engagement resolution denial. The first actual casualty occurred almost accidentally. A human platform, unarmed by galactic standards, adjusted its position. The movement was subtle, an alignment correction measured in microns. But the adjustment collapsed a tension the invaders had not known they were creating. One escort vessel ceased to exist. Not destroyed. Not exploded. Simply removed, as if the universe had decided it was never meant to occupy that location. The void it left behind closed seamlessly, leaving confused sensor echoes and no debris. Silence followed. Then panic. Fleet commanders shouted orders, but their voices lagged, desynchronized by time dilation rippling through the formation. Emergency protocols triggered across hundreds of vessels simultaneously, overwhelming command hierarchies built on predictability. From Earth, the human transmission returned, this time broadcast through channels the invaders had not opened. "We will clarify," the human said calmly. "You are not under attack." A pause. "You are inside a system where we are no longer restraining ourselves." They explained briefly, almost politely, that humanity had once explored paths the galaxy avoided. Weapons that did not destroy, but decided. Defenses that did not block, but forbade. Systems built not to win wars, but to end the concept of escalation entirely. And then they had shut it all down. Because when humanity looked at what it had built, it recognized itself in the weapons, and did not like what it saw. So they slept. They distracted themselves with art, conflict, culture, noise. They let the galaxy believe they were immature, divided, inefficient. It was easier than being feared. Safer than being needed. But sleep, the human concluded, is not amnesia. Across Sol, the final locks disengaged. The Terror Coalition's fleets found themselves suddenly surrounded, not by ships, but by decisions already made. Every vector accounted for. Every outcome bounded. The galaxy's greatest terror had not awakened a monster. It had awakened a species that had already decided, long ago, how to end wars. And had hoped it would never have to. The Terror Coalition attempted to retreat. That, more than anything, revealed how completely the battle had already been lost. Orders rippled through the fleet to disengage, to jump, to scatter, any maneuver that restored uncertainty. Drives spooled up in fragmented bursts, struggling against navigation systems that could no longer agree on where a way was. Space around Sol had become a curated environment, its rules no longer universal. Human constructs moved, not with speed, but with inevitability. They did not chase targets. They repositioned outcomes. Platforms adjusted their orientation by infinitesimal degrees, collapsing future possibilities until only one remained. Where a terror vessel intended to flee, the path simply failed to exist. Where it attempted to fight, its weapons resolved into irrelevance before firing. This was not warfare as the galaxy understood it. There were no lines, no fronts, no heroic last stands. Human doctrine did not value spectacle. It valued closure. One by one, terror ships were neutralized, not destroyed, but removed from contention. Some were displaced into null orbits, frozen in time-dilated pockets where command signals could never arrive. Others were rendered inert, their internal systems convinced, at a fundamental level, that activation conditions were unmet. A battleship attempted to ram a human construct in desperation. The collision never occurred. The ship passed through a region where momentum became negotiable. Its mass redistributed across a probability gradient until structural coherence could not be maintained. When observers tried to describe what happened, language failed. The vessel was neither broken nor intact. It was undecided, and that state was not survivable. Across the fleet, terror commanders struggled to understand the pattern. Human weapons did not escalate. They concluded. Every engagement ended with finality, no follow-up strikes required, no cleanup operations needed. Once a vessel was neutralized, it was no longer a factor. The humans did not seek annihilation. They sought removal of threat. Even more unsettling was the calm. Human communications showed no adrenaline spikes, no panic, no triumph. Orders were issued conversationally. Corrections were acknowledged politely. To human operators, this was not a desperate defense of their homeworld. It was the execution of a long-prepared contingency. Galactic observers, those few who still had functioning long-range sensors, watched in disbelief. They had seen empires fight for survival before. They had never seen a species fight as if the outcome had already been audited. The Terror Coalition attempted one final escalation. A dread carrier initiated a system-level purge protocol, a weapon designed to sterilize biospheres by destabilizing stellar output. The activation sequence began, and then stopped. Human systems did not intercept it. They overruled it. The dread carrier's own core rejected the command, recognizing it as invalid within the current operational reality. Its crew watched in horror as their greatest weapon refused to acknowledge the universe they were trying to destroy. The human transmission cut in one last time. "Please do not attempt further escalation," the voice said, still measured. "We have accounted for it." The remaining terror ships fell silent. Some surrendered, broadcasting unconditional compliance. Others drifted, their crews realizing that survival no longer depended on resistance, but on not being noticed. Within minutes, a fleet that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries was no longer a military force. It was a collection of resolved errors. As the last hostile signature faded, one truth settled over the battlefield with crushing clarity. This was not a battle humanity had struggled to win. It was one they had delayed. Because they had hoped never to fight it at all. The battle for Sol ended without a victory broadcast. There was no declaration of triumph, no pursuit of fleeing remnants, no attempt to capitalize on momentum. Humanity simply stopped. Human constructs returned to passive orbits. Energy signatures diminished. Space began, cautiously, to behave like space again. Across the galaxy, the silence was deafening. Observational outposts that had survived by hiding their emissions reoriented long-dormant sensors toward Sol. What they expected to see was a devastated system, a dead star, a shattered planet, the final proof that no one could resist the Terror Coalition. Instead, they saw Earth intact. The Terror fleets were gone. Not destroyed in flaming wreckage. Not scattered across escape vectors. Simply absent, reduced to anomalous readings, unresolved data gaps, and a handful of drifting, powerless hulls. The implications spread faster than panic. Galactic communication nets flooded with emergency queries. Councils convened openly for the first time in generations. Archivists tore through ancient records, searching for anything that could explain what had happened. They found nothing. Humanity's past had been deliberately unremarkable. No myths of god weapons. No warnings etched into spacetime. No forbidden zones marking soul as untouchable. The galaxy had believed it knew humans. Now it realized it had never looked. Fear took a different shape this time. This was not the terror inspired by overwhelming force or inevitable conquest. It was the fear of misjudgment, of having lived beside something incomprehensible and never noticing. Species that had mocked humans scrambled to revise their stances. Diplomatic channels lit up with carefully worded messages, sudden offers of alliance, retroactive respect. Worlds that had once dismissed Earth now spoke its name cautiously, as if volume alone might attract attention. Among the surviving Terror commanders, those trapped in null states or drifting powerless, understanding arrived slowly and painfully. They had not lost to a superior fleet. They had lost to a species that refused to play the same game. Humanity had not outgrown war. It had outdesigned it. The most unsettling realization spread through every remaining center of power. Humans had ended the Terror coalition not by becoming more aggressive, but by deciding that escalation itself was unacceptable. And if they could do that, what else could they forbid? Records were quietly amended. New classifications were created. Humanity. Status, unknown. Threat level, unquantifiable. Recommendation, do not provoke. Do not test. Do not assume. For the first time in galactic history, fear was not tied to a fleet, a weapon, or a strategy. It was tied to restraint. Because the galaxy now understood the most terrifying truth of all. Humanity had awakened, not in rage, not in vengeance, but in control. And nothing frightened the stars more than a species that knew exactly how powerful it was. And chose, most of the time, not to be. The warning did not come as an ultimatum. It arrived quietly, embedded within restored galactic channels, formatted in every known linguistic structure and delivered with careful precision. There were no demands for territory, no declarations of supremacy, no lists of consequences. Just a statement. Humanity addressed the galaxy as a whole, not as conquerors, but as witnesses. We did not awaken to rule you, the message began. We awakened because you brought war to our home. The transmission outlined what no other species had ever admitted openly: power without limits destabilizes civilizations faster than any external enemy. Humanity explained, without apology, that it had once stood at the same crossroads the Terror Coalition had chosen. The path of endless escalation. Of dominance enforced through fear. And they had turned away. Crayon Sleep, the message clarified, was not weakness, ignorance, or regression. It was a societal decision to bind their own hands until restraint became instinct rather than effort. To ensure that when humanity acted, it would do so with clarity, not impulse. We slept, the humans said, so that our worst selves would never become your gods. They made no attempt to justify their technology, nor did they explain its full scope. The galaxy was given just enough information to understand the boundary and the cost of crossing it. Humanity would not expand aggressively. Humanity would not interfere in internal disputes. Humanity would not impose order. But there were conditions. No fleets were to approach Sol uninvited. No attempts were to be made to reverse engineer human systems. No species was to pursue extinction-level warfare again. These are not negotiations, the message concluded. They are limits. And then came the most unsettling line of all. We will return to sleep. Across human space, constructs powered down. Impossible signatures faded. The universe exhaled, cautiously. But the galaxy did not relax. Because the message had made one fact unavoidably clear: humanity's restraint was voluntary, and therefore revocable. Worlds that had once raced toward larger weapons quietly dismantled programs they could no longer justify. Councils rewrote doctrines around containment rather than conquest. Even the most aggressive species began to speak of balance, not victory. Not because humanity demanded it, but because no one wanted to be the reason the crayons disappeared again. The warning ended without flourish, without threat. Yet its echo lingered across the stars, reshaping behavior more effectively than any empire ever had. Humanity slept once more, and the galaxy learned to tread softly around the dreams of a species that had already decided how wars should end. The galaxy had changed, but subtly. No monuments were built in humanity's honor. No fleets saluted from orbit. No banners were raised. The humans did not want worship. They had only wanted the certainty that restraint could coexist with power. Yet every star system felt it. Even the farthest colonies sensed the shift. Species that once moved with arrogance now paused before expansion. Councils that had debated annihilation now debated ethics. Wars became slower, quieter, more deliberate. Humanity's awakening had rewritten the rules without firing a single universal shot. On Earth, life returned to its ordinary rhythm. Cities hummed. Oceans lapped. Art, music, and debate filled the air. Humanity had proven its might, and yet chose to live as if nothing had happened. To the galaxy, this was disconcerting, almost insulting. They expected vengeance, conquest, or domination. Humanity gave none. Histories were quietly rewritten. Terrifying weapons once hidden were resealed. Lessons of Crayon Sleep were catalogued, not as manuals of war, but as guides to self-restraint. The galaxy would remember, not because it was forced to, but because it could not forget. The Terror Coalition, reduced to whispers and drifting wrecks, faded into legend. Other species debated whether to call it victory or survival. Either way, the lesson was clear: underestimate humans at your peril. And the humans? They watched from their orbits and hidden platforms, curious but patient. The galaxy could learn in its own time. They had waited 10,000 years once. They could wait 10,000 more. One final line circulated across the silent frequencies, unrecorded and never repeated, meant only for those who survived to hear. The crayons are gone. And the children are awake. And with that, the universe exhaled, uneasy, uncertain, and acutely aware that the galaxy's most underestimated species had returned not in anger, but in command.